Let us reclaim these stories and make them our own. They're universal truth, and they're for us. They're for each one of us. So it's Easter. It's one of those days that the road of life keeps leading us back to every single year. Actually, there are many days like that, like your birthday and other holidays and days that you've decided are special for some reason or another. You may be in like completely different physical locations or different circumstance. Each time you come around and encounter a day on the calendar, come in completely different emotional states, frames of mind, in the company of different people or the same people each time, and you get to that day. And in that way, life provides you variety and at the same time familiarity as you go, right? So Easter. Now, if you come from a Christian background, today probably has different significance to you than if your background was Muslim or Buddhist or something like that, right? And if you've been here at CSL Tampa Bay, you know that I take this opportunity to kind of share new insights on this day. It's full of ancient tradition and wisdom and meaning, but so hopefully I can give you something Eastery to kind of chew on today. So my talk title is Bunnies and Crosses and Stones, oh my, right? But I could have made a lot longer list of Eastery things that, kind of we associate with this day. And see, this is my 61st time around on the road of life to Easter. And each time I've visited it, as you can imagine, I've picked up different things. So the first 8 years of my life, I found Easter to be quite joyful. We were sharing in Sacred Cup our favorite Easter memories this morning. They were quite colorful. You should ask some people who were there. But so those early years, it was all about spring, and I lived in Colorado, so getting outside in the spring was really important. My grandmother dyed eggs, and we did all the fun, normal stuff, families and cousins and all that stuff. And then the next 10 years taught me some very different things, because it was about around my 8th birthday that I was introduced to this religion, the lessons in religion about Easter. And so when my dad took us into fundamentalist Christianity, we kind of left all the secular fun Easter stuff behind, and I was kind of isolated at this church learning about the cross and all the things that we talk about at Easter. And it took me many years to kind of figure out my own relationship with the Easter story. And then I turned 30 and I had my daughter, and then I really decided to go back to bunnies and eggs and all the fun stuff again, right? But it wasn't until I started on my spiritual path that I got curious about the symbolism, right? The symbolism and the metaphysical interpretation of the religious concepts that I had been exposed to in my early years of Christianity. So I didn't ever take the whole Easter story literally, but I got very interested in what Holmes and other metaphysical teachers too, I wanted to know what they had to say about Easter. But before I get into that, I want to stop and say one other thing. What is my motivation to learn about Easter and to talk to you about Easter? I wanted peace. I wanted peace. I was carrying around a lot of trauma where religion was concerned, and I had encountered this very hurtful and damaging Christian tradition, and I was really, really scarred by it, actually. And I walked away from religion. I put it behind a big old wall, right? The religion was over there, right? And I felt powerless that I could change anything about it. So I just abandoned it completely and walked away from it. And I was fine, with Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny. I mean, those were just fine stand-ins for holidays. So maybe you can relate to that. But as I approached age 40 or so, I felt the desire to heal it. I realized that if I was holding anything behind a wall, it continued to hold power behind that wall. And since I had given religion that power, I could also take that power back. So knowledge is how I take my power back. Changing things, the way I look at things, takes my power back. And again, the road of life is going to keep leading us back to places that make us curious about what power we left with that, so that we can live a life of wholeness and freedom and get our power back. That's what healing lets us do. So spiritual study helped me kind of dismantle that wall. And let me share some things that might help you do that too, because making peace with my religious upbringing has been a very positive, impactful part of my life, starting with the major holidays, taking a tiny bit each year and looking at it. That's been transformational for me. So let's dive into this Easter story. So let's remember the story of the death and resurrection of Master Teacher Jesus and see if we can take it out from behind that wall, okay? I'm going to start with a quote. It has nothing to do with Christianity, though. My quote is from Lao Tzu. When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be. And this quote from Lao Tzu speaks of an eternal truth that we all understand on a deep level. There will always come a time when something has to die for something new to emerge. And that's what I want to talk about this morning. And this time of year, we know that we've got to rake away all the plant debris that builds up in the colder weather. I was talking in Sacred Cup, we did that a lot more in Atlanta than we do here, but we'd clear it all away, and then these little new things would start breaking forth. And the garden contains a great lesson for us in our spiritual lives as well, because deep within, we look for newness. We look for a new perspective, a new way of looking at a situation, perhaps an entirely new way of being. And we desire this kind of breakthrough experience and a freshness of new life. So we learn that we must clear away the old to grow something new. Now, this telling of this kind of story has been since the beginning of the measurement of time. There has always been a story about this divine truth. And today I want to explore 3 versions of this story. Sacred Cup had several versions of it, but we're just going to talk about 3 today. And these stories have been told for centuries because they are so rich, and they always have lessons of a spiritual nature embedded in them, because only the stories that we relate to deeply do they stick around for centuries, right? So we examine all the world religions and the ancient philosophies and mythology, just as Ernest Holmes did, to find these elements of spiritual truth that are waiting for us to find in their teachings. So the first version of the story that I want to tell is very, very old. It's an old Sumerian legend. It's actually an epic myth that was found inscribed on clay tablets dating back to 2100 BC. That's a long time ago, a long time ago. And it's the legend of Tammuz and his wife Ishtar, okay? And the story goes that when Tammuz dies, Ishtar, his wife, is just absolutely grief-stricken, and she follows him into the underworld. And as she follows, she enters through 7 gates, and her earthly clothing is removed. Naked and bowing low, she is judged, killed, and hung on display. Sound familiar? Right? And as she's in the underworld, the earth above loses its fertility in her absence. The crops cease to grow, and animals stop reproducing. And unless something is done, all life on earth will end without Ishtar. So, after she has been missing for 3 days, her assistant goes to the other gods for help. And finally, one of them creates 2 creatures who carry the plant and water life down to the underworld, sprinkling them on Ishtar and Tammuz. And this resurrects them and gives them the power to return to earth as the light of the sun for 6 months. But after the 6 months are up, Tammuz returns to the underworld of the dead. And then 6 months later, Ishtar pursues him, prompting the water god to rescue them both again. And the cycles of winter death and spring life is thus created. 2100 BC, right? Familiar story, right? This ancient legend illustrates that spiritual principle we're talking about, that something must die for new life to occur, and that everything remains in balance and cycles from dormancy to new life over and over again. Ishtar withdraws from the earth, loses her clothes or her identity, and the legend says she dies, yet she is resurrected to come forth in a new expression. Very interesting and somewhat familiar story, right? Now, the second version, I want to read a passage from Ernest Holmes in this thing called You. Great little book if you haven't read it. But it's his version of this kind of story. He said, let us take another illustration. Let us think of a tunnel on one end of which is out in the open where there are fertile valleys, glorious sunshine, and verdant vegetation. There is song and laughter, happiness, peace, and joy. Let us call this the valley of contentment. Let us also call it the kingdom of God. You are at the other end of this tunnel in a deep, dark cavern overlooking a desert through which no refreshing streams flow. Somehow your attention has been drawn to the open end of this tunnel. With a curiosity that you did not put in your own mind, you wish to investigate where this tunnel leads and what is at the other end of it. At first it seems dark, but occasionally a shaft of light shines through it and you catch a vision of the other side. You have a great longing to walk through this tunnel, to leave behind the dismal scene of discontent and unhappiness and enter into the joy that your brief glimpse has promised. For in this glimpse you have seemed to see yourself standing at the other end of the tunnel. Perhaps in this momentary vision you seem to have seen your own spirit. It seems as though something says, yes, this is myself. How am I going to unite myself with myself? Then darkness closes in. Your vision has vanished. It must have been an illusion. Now there are two voices that seem to be talking to you. One voice says, you're following a mirage, an illusion. There's nothing real but this end of the tunnel. Accept things as they are. Make the best of them. Be as happy as you can, but do not hope. This is the voice of despair. The other voice is saying, do not be afraid. Your vision is true. Enter the tunnel and walk through. There is nothing solid in it. That which obstructs your passage is vapor, the vapor of unbelief. As you walk through the tunnel, the darkness will disappear because of the light. You will find that other half of yourself, and you will discover that this tunnel is your own mind. This is a picture of yourself, your efforts, your hopes and longings, your inspirations and doubts, your fears and faith. So here, I believe Ernest Holmes is actually illustrating the same spiritual truth that we desire to live a new life, express everything new, as Derek's saying, but there's this proverbial tunnel that we have to go through. Version number 2. So today, in most churches around the world, Christians are celebrating the resurrection in the Bible of Jesus, the master teacher. And this story is pretty much at the center of Christianity. And Ernest Holmes always looked for that golden thread of truth in all religions. For in this story of his death and resurrection, there's the same wisdom for us. So let me share the third version of this ancient story for you. And I'm going to pick up right after the crucifixion in the Bible, in Luke 23 and 49. It said, but all those who knew him, including the women who had followed him from Galilee, stood at a distance watching these things. Now there was a man named Joseph, a member of the council, a good and upright man, who had not consented to their decision and action. He came from the Judean town of Arimathea, and he himself was waiting for the kingdom of God. Going to Pilate, he asked for Jesus' body. Then he took it down, wrapped it in a linen cloth, and placed it in a tomb cut in the rock, one which no one had yet been laid. It was preparation day, and the Sabbath was about to begin. The women who had come with Jesus from Galilee followed Joseph and saw the tomb and how his body was laid in it. Then they went home and prepared spices and perfumes, but they rested on the Sabbath in obedience to the commandment. And on the first day of the week, very early in the morning, the women took the spices they had prepared and went to the tomb. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but when they entered, they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus. While they were wondering about this, suddenly 2 men in clothes that gleamed like lightning stood beside them. In their fright, the women bowed down with their faces to the ground, but the men said to them, why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here, he has risen. Remember how he told you when he was still with you in Galilee. The Son of Man must be delivered over to the hands of the sinners, be crucified, and on the third day be raised again." Then they remembered his words, and when they came back from the tomb, they told these things to the 11 and to all the others. It was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary, the mother of James, and the others with them who told this to the apostles. But they did not believe the women, because their words seemed to them like nonsense. Peter, however, got up and ran to the tomb. Bending over, he saw the strips of linen lying by themselves, and he went away, wondering to himself what had happened. So let's break down this final version of the story, see if we can relate to it. What wisdom might be there for us? First of all, what is very interesting to me about this story is that Jesus died alone and was resurrected alone. Now that strikes me, because if you're familiar with the story of Jesus, you know that he always had a posse of people around him, right? Like he had been followed by disciples and others for all this time, in throngs and multitudes and all these things, but at the time of his death, they stood very far off. And that's a very important time in his journey. And at this time, his friends were not around him, right? The element of solitude is also part of the Ishtar myth and part of Holmes's tunnel, right? In these critical moments of our transformative journey, we find ourselves alone. I'll talk more about that in a minute. So this story in Luke says that someone else, someone righteous, took his body and wrapped it and laid it in the tomb. The disciples, the close friends of Jesus, did not attend to his death. It was someone special for this particular role. And there was an assistant, remember, who got the water god in the myth, right? A special someone who helped. Holmes also writes of the voices around you that encourage you when you're in the tunnel of transformation. It was the women who were around Jesus that noticed where he had been entombed, and after the Sabbath, they came back to properly care for his body 3 days later. See, that divine feminine energy knows where life and death takes place, right? Of course, we know when they in the story, when they returned, the stone was rolled away and the body wasn't there, and they were seeking the living among the dead. And when they went to tell Peter and the others, they thought those women were delusional, right? But they went to check out the story for themselves. You know, I think all three stories describe a pattern we have all experienced in our lives, and we can all relate to it. This type of story is very relevant to our lives today and illustrates how personal transformation takes place. So here's what we're doing. We're just going along. We're just living our life in a certain way. We're surrounded by friends and others who help us live our lives in that certain way. We surround ourselves with people who match our beliefs, our adventures, our creations. They seem to all kind of live at the same level we do. They're our peeps, right? Not those kind of peeps, Rebecca. Not those kind of peeps. You know, your peeps, what are they? They're comfortable at your house. They eat what you eat. They go to your favorite hangouts together. Everything's going along just fine. I don't think it's a very good idea to refer to them as your disciples, but that's a whole nother matter. But everything's going along fine. You're just hanging out with your people, and then you enter phase one. And phase one of this story is a stirring. Something begins to stir inside of us. We somehow get this glimpse of a new possibility for ourselves. We see something in that tunnel that speaks to us. Perhaps your job begins to feel a little uncomfortable, like we've outgrown it, you know. Maybe we see a better relationship possibility for ourselves. Perhaps we get sick and tired of the way. We're sick and tired of being sick and tired, and we want to change something about our lives. Perhaps the things we always thought were funny are no longer funny. The habits of the group of people, the habits that this group of people accept are no longer acceptable to us. The conversations, the old arguments have become boring. It's a universal experience. This longing for something bigger, something brighter, something better is in all of us. We all have it. That's the stirring. Our higher self is propelling us to something greater. We start to feel what I call the divine discontent, get restless. We begin to ask ourselves some really big questions. So do I have to die to take on a new life? Will I have a resurrection? What really is on the other side of that tunnel? So what happens when we get the urge to move beyond and there's something is hindering us. We want to go past it. We enter phase 2, the withdrawal. So in this phase, we begin to distance ourselves from the things that are familiar. We enter into that solitude. What does that look like? Think about it. Maybe you became aloof with your coworkers, or you might get snippy with people, or you might stop showing up at all the familiar places and events. We stop ordering the same food and beverages we've been ordering, and our friends may get uncomfortable as they notice us shifting our patterns. We're different. We might withdraw from the conversations that we used to join. We're changing. We're allowing the outgrown stuff to fall away from ourselves. In a sense, we're dying. The old part of ourselves is falling away. It's natural. It's natural. Animals withdraw to die alone, don't they? Our domestic pets don't really get a moment free from us, right? We have to take care of that in a different way. But in the wild, animals move away to die. Butterflies go into a cocoon to transform. It's a sacred time to be alone. And sometimes in our wisdom, in the withdrawal phase, we do manifest someone righteous to help us, don't we? Sometimes a practitioner or a minister can point us in the right direction. A teacher will suggest a new path. We can usually find someone to talk about the change that we wish to make. Ernest Holmes wrote this in The Hidden Meaning of the Bible. He said, "The angel of our better selves keeps watch by the graves of our lesser selves, pointing the way to life, truth, and beauty." Almost always, we withdraw for the proverbial 3 days in a tomb of our own making. Both Ishtar and Jesus took those 3 days, so perhaps we should too. We go dormant for a period of time. We don't use those linens they talked about. We use a lot of Kleenex, though, right? A lot of Kleenex. We grieve and mourn our former way of being. We release the old stomping grounds, the old ways of being. We read books. I'm actually increasingly aware that a lot of people come here to our community when you're in the withdrawal phase. You're changing your life, and you need to find people to kind of hide with, if you will, while you figure some things out. I think we provide that tunnel and that tomb experience. And eventually, we're ready to emerge from the tunnel, right? From the tomb. We enter the phase 3, which is the emergence. But wait, what about the stone? What about the stone? It had to be rolled away for the emergence to occur, right? The barriers that we just read about are suddenly very real. I like to think of the stone as everyone's expectations of us. Everyone, including our dog, expect us to come back the same person that we were. Everyone wants us to speak the same language, to wear the same clothes, just to be the same person. Here's the deal. We want to be liked. We want our posse of familiarity. So it's easy to stay trapped by this stone, even though we know we've created something new for ourselves. It's hard to roll away that stone. We have all kinds of thoughts about the expectations of other people. And these are the thoughts that limit our lives and keep us out of the transformation. We've got to roll it away. It's the final step before we can emerge as our Christ conscious, our more enlightened self. And when we roll the stone away, we're free. And don't worry. Your friends are going to come looking for you. They're going to come looking for you. Even if you told them you were changing and moving on, they're going to still come look for you. They're going to be looking for the living among the dead, so to speak, but you're not going to be there. They're going to run back and tell others, "Ooh, something has happened. They're different." But you have to stay in your own emergence. And I've had several experiences of this, haven't you? Like I remember when I found this path of spirituality, I couldn't do it in Atlanta. I did it when I moved far away, where I could change my whole self, my whole way of being. And then when I came back to Atlanta 4 years later, I could emerge as my new kind of self. And things were not the same when I came back. And 6 years ago, when I ended my 13-year marriage, COVID provided a perfect tomb for me, for me to mourn and release all of those life structures. I had to roll away this huge stone of expectation and familiarity to emerge and create a new life and remarry for that matter. And many of you witnessed that for me. Some of you brought me some tissues and some bottles of water and things as I moved on and rebuilt. Those are just my stories. What are yours? What are yours? I hope you can relate to this too. You know, perhaps you quit smoking or changed your diet or decided to quit gossiping or something like that. You know, a decision to improve your life. There's probably something on your mind today that is wanting a rebirth for you. This spring, take a look at that this morning. Let's have the wisdom to notice the areas of our lives that are dying because they've served their purpose. Let's allow them to die. Let's find some great spiritual guides to walk with us. Hand out the Kleenex, right? And when it comes time to burst forth, let us have the strength to push away the stone. So I invite you to roll away the stone of any thought of your own insignificance. Roll away the stone of perceived limitations. Roll away the stone of a belief in the power of other people in your life. Roll away a stone that says you'll never find your soulmate. Roll away the stone that says you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're not thin enough or healthy enough or worthy enough or perfect enough. Roll away those stones. We have a choice today. We can waste our time arguing over whether the story from 2,000 years ago is literal or not, and know that something happened. Something happened, and it has positively impacted all of us with a hope for renewal. Whether it is Jesus in the tomb, Ishtar in the underworld, or us in our own tunnel of transformation on the journey of life, that's why we tell the Easter story. Let us reclaim these stories and make them our own. They're universal truth, and they're for us. They're for each one of us. Will you pray with me? Oh, I just enter into a moment of mindfulness. Mindfulness that everything is new. I see this day as a symbol of new life, of newness, of transformation. I know that the joy that we feel is the joy of spirit. I know that the love that we break out into is the love of God itself. I know that anything old can be removed and released so that new things can be expressed. It is a story as old as time. And so we embrace it this morning. We claim it as our own, and we roll away any stones that hold us back. I am so grateful for the opportunity to look at the bigger truth embedded in old stories. So grateful. I let it go and let it be. And so it is.